Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of January 4th, 2022, and officially episode number 499. And this is your host, Dr. Brian D. Parsons, and we are live on the Paranormal King radio network at paranormalking.com. Yes, the first show of 2022. And on the cusp of hitting 500 with 499, we're on the edge of the cliff. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but yeah, it's been a long journey to get this far to 499. And we'll see where 500 takes us. I don't really have any plans for that, but we'll see what happens for that show number 500. This week, it's only the 4th, so not a whole lot of new news. There's a little bit of stuff that happened over the weekend, but most of tonight's stuff is kind of a continuation of a look back at last year, although some of these stories happened right at the tail end, pun intended on that one, you'll find that out, of 2021. And we'll look back at a few stories tonight from last year, including the top UAP/UFO stories of 2021. Not my list, but somebody else's list, and we'll talk about that. But first, I want to mention I spent a little time updating the events listing on the website for 2022, and it's a long process normally, but it's even worse now with the COVID and difficulty in securing some of these event sites and local laws and different things, and people just really being even more tentative. And usually these events get thrown together within a few months of being put on, which I don't recommend. I plan mine a year in advance. Actually, not even that long, probably 10 months in advance. And it still wasn't even long enough to curtail some of the issues I encountered. So I always tell people, if you're going to do a paranormal conference or convention, give it a year. Plan it a year in advance, if not longer. Everyone just seems to want to jump into it and throw it together and March or April, but they want to have it in September or August. That's just not enough time. And seen it, it's a little difficult this year watching some of these events that were put on last year. A lot of them are still lingering for their decision on doing something for 2022. I do have the ghost section updated. Now, it's not the full list. I'm sure there's plenty that I've missed out there, but that of the 3 segments that I have, the UFO, then cryptid, the ghost section, which is generally the one that more people go to than any other, that one is updated again, although I'm sure there's a few that I've got to add yet. I just kind of updated the list that I had last year for this year, but I have a whole pile of events that I have to add pretty much in all 3 categories. So it's a slow go, and I've noticed again that a lot of places have not updated for this year. So kind of a fruitless search trying to get those things updated. So the list is a little smaller this year than it has been in the last couple of years. And I'm still kind of wondering how many are going to get canceled or postponed. There's quite a few that happened earlier in the year. So that'll be interesting. These ones that are in February, January, February, March. We'll see what happens. But we will see how these develop, and hopefully I almost don't want to invest too much time in updating the list because of what happened the last 2 years of cancellations and events being moved a year or two. There are some events that have missed 2 years now that are being put on this year that weren't on last year, postponed from 2020 all the way to this year. So yikes, fingers crossed we'll see how these things develop. Other anomalous notes for you this week. The top 10 paranormal news stories of 2021 is now officially available on the blog page from the Paranormal News Insider home at paranewsinsider.com. And I did post that through the Paranews Insider Facebook page. I should say the Paranormal News Insider Facebook page at facebook.com/Paranews Insider. Of course, you can just search Paranormal News Insider, which also hit Twitter, which is also at Paranews Insider. So that is out there. See, a few people have read that. So it's kind of cool. Some people like to hear it. Other people want to see it. Some people want to read the links and see some pictures and things. So I've added links to those stories from my show notes, as well as one picture each. I don't want to get too carried away with some of those, but yeah, have at it. Read about last year, but let's look forward to 2022 and what's going to happen this year. I think that's it for my notes. Yeah, I'm going to continue to update the events listing. And one new trend that I'm seeing, one event so far, I've read a rumor that this is going to happen at a couple of other events. So you might want to kind of keep this in mind if you get all excited about going to a paranormal conference or convention. The Oregon Ghost Conference, which is late March, let's see, the 25th through the 27th, they're going to be requiring proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test for all speakers, vendors, instructors, and attendees. I don't know if that's a local ordinance or that's something that they're doing. I don't know the legality behind that either, but yeah, be prepared. That's the first I've seen of that after 2 years. I don't know if they're just doing it because cruise lines are doing it or airlines are doing similar things, but they have to. There's some stuff that they have to do before they're allowed to do that. So I don't know the legality on that, but I don't know what's going on out there in Oregon. So, but yeah, be aware that they may ask for that kind of stuff. So welcome to 2022, I guess. That's different. So let's open it up. Let's go into the cryptid news for this week. A lot of cryptid news this week. It seems like it's been all cryptid news as of lately. Alligator sightings. I'm sure a lot of people, some people maybe are getting a little tired of the alligator stuff. I don't know. It just doesn't stop. It's not like I'm looking for it. They just keep popping in to a couple of my news feeds. It's just crazy. I don't know if they've learned that I like these stories, and I don't know, but they just keep popping in. So we've had a lot of these random alligator sightings in the northeastern part of the United States, or even the northern part of the United States. They don't live there, so they're basically getting there by people are dumping them off. But these sightings generally take place in the warmer months of the year. However, a report was updated on New Year's Eve. It states that police and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection officials found and rescued a 4-foot-long alligator in the Guilford, Connecticut area last Thursday. The details behind where the alligator was found was not revealed, but officials stated that it was easy to catch, of course, because of the cold conditions. So it's not really going to be feeding. It probably didn't have a whole lot of energy. Their heart rate, metabolism, all that slows down in the cold. They can't really survive too long that way. So it didn't put up much of a fight. So the alligator is named Stella and is headed to an aquarium. I guess it says to live out its life. That's kind of harsh. The Guilford Police Department states via their Facebook page that alligators are prohibited pets according to Connecticut state law. And reading the Connecticut state law, it's pretty much every animal under the sun that's illegal. I was trying to think of some animal that you could sneak in there, but man, their list is pretty intense. So yeah, don't throw those out in the pond. It's pretty much a death sentence, especially this time of the year. They can't make it in the super cold. That's why they don't live here. If it was okay, they'd be living in Connecticut already. But it's too difficult when it's too cold, especially a smaller gator like that with probably 6 months of weather that's in the low 40s or high 30s. Just not conducive. Worse yet, north of the border, go even further north, Connecticut, you go to Canada, and kind of a startling story out there at first when I first read it, but then I dug into it a little bit more, and it's even worse. At least 5 exotic snakes, as well as an alligator, were found dead in a ditch in the town of Caledon near Toronto. It gets outside of Mississauga in Ontario. The dead animals were discovered apparently after a phone call about animal cruelty at a private menagerie in a nearby area. Toronto Zoo CEO Dolph DeJong said, quote, "Unfortunately, this is not a unique situation in Ontario. Many individuals are operating non-accredited roadside zoos or have exotic animals in private ownership. We continue to work with the provincial and federal governments to ensure strong regulations are put into place to prevent the private ownership of exotic and endangered animals or the housing of these animals in roadside zoos," unquote. So apparently somebody got caught and they tried to dispose of the evidence. Pretty sad. But again, you wonder if they were deceased before that or they just were pitched into the roadside. So this again continues to add up to all these stories of 3 to 4 foot long alligators being discovered in ponds. Then you get to these people that are putting together roadside zoos or backyard zoos. It seems like everybody wants an exotic animal nowadays. You probably saw the video. The lady was it Kuwait carrying a lion down an alley, down a street. That's crazy. It just seems like people everywhere want to have an exotic pet, exotic animal. We talked about the servals and caracals from last year. Exotic cats that people want to have. Where does it end? And what will it eventually do to our environment if these animals do escape, do get out? Obviously, alligators are not going to get a very strong foothold in southern Canada or northern United States. Not going to happen. Well, unless the temperatures rise. Maybe possible along the coast, but probably not. Speaking of servals and caracals, the escaped exotic animals, 2021, we talked about that. That was the number 7 story. I think I should know because I wrote it. And I think it was. I hope I'm right. And the escaped tiger in Houston, that was number 5 on the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2021. What's going to happen this year? Well, WLUK, Fox 11 News out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, they wrapped up 2021 with a story discussing 2 escaped exotic animals. The first was a story we did talk about here on the show. It was Rex the alligator. Rex somehow climbed out of his fenced-in enclosure at Doc's Zoo, at Doc's Harley-Davidson in Bondewell, Wisconsin. Yes, they can climb fences. The 10-foot-long alligator was loose for 3 days before being wrangled up by a small army of volunteers and returned to its cage. I think they made the cage a couple of feet taller. Doesn't mean that he can't get out of that one. Despite being a heavy year for loose alligators in places they're not supposed to be, the multitude of stories, unfortunately, just didn't crack the top 10 last year. Most of them were small stories, making Rex probably one of the more viral stories of the year. The second story covered by WLUK is one that I don't remember hearing about, but it's very similar to the one that happened in Maryland a month later. So in August, a pair of zebras escaped an enclosure in Seymour, Wisconsin, and were loose for a couple of days before being captured. As for the pair of surviving zebras that escaped in mid-August in Maryland, well, that hit my show in September, and we talked about it for a couple of months. They were finally captured after 4 months in mid-December. Of the 3 escaped zebras in Maryland, one was found dead after being caught in an illegal snare trap very close to the fence where the rest of the zebras were roaming. The owner is still under investigation for animal cruelty and other allegations. So I guess there was more zebra escapes than I had realized. That's disturbing. They could probably live. If they escaped, got into the woods, and he had probably take more than one breeding pair because they would obviously inbreed, and that causes problems. But if you had a few breeding pairs, it's possible they could take off. You got reestablished elk in Pennsylvania, and they're kind of growing out of control. Other animals been reintroduced. I don't think zebras have ever lived here, but we used to have wild horses, and they're fairly close to that. So that'd be interesting. Continuing on the alligators, there's a weird story today out of WLWT, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. They're reporting on a strange creature, get this, found on top of a 16-story building. Now, obviously, I have read one outlet out of California that insinuated that this creature crawled up 16 stories. Nobody said that I know of from the different things that I read on it. It was found on top of a 16-story senior center in, what was it? Can't remember the name. Madisonville? It's outside. It's just northeast of, well, it's pretty much in the Cincinnati metro area, but it's northeast of downtown Cincinnati. It was discovered during an alarm check on the roof. So members of the senior center went up there with fire crews, and they discovered this creature just chilling out. Well, it was pretty much dead, but it was still warm, according to the story, and not frozen. We had temperatures here in Ohio that were well below freezing, mid-20s last night. Did warm up today. It was in the low 40s this afternoon here where I live, a couple hours, about 3.5 hours north of this location. And off and on, it's been freezing. So can't imagine that creature would have survived very much longer. Very small, very short creature, about 6.5 inches. So it's not your typical 3-4 foot alligator that normally gets tossed out, but you don't usually see one on top of a building, just chilling out on the roof. Authorities have no idea where it came from at this point, but I got a picture of it. I'll throw it in chat so you guys can take a look if you've not seen this story. Again, it's kind of a new story today, and the way they took the picture, you really can't tell what it is. It could be an iguana, could be an alligator. Some sources said crocodile, but that's not a crocodile head. It could be either an alligator or an iguana, depends, but it's very, very small. Either way, if it's an iguana, it's probably, it's not quite an adult, still adolescent to a babyish, from what I've seen, but it doesn't really give much detail the way they've taken these pictures, looking straight down. But there's one there with a ruler, and the tail ends right after 6 inches, so it's not very big. But still, how did it get there? Who had it at a senior center? You think they would know. But granted, 16 stories, that's a lot of rooms, that's a lot of people. But you'd think that they would know somebody who had one. And how would somebody get up on the roof anyway? Seems kind of weird to me. But I don't know. We'll see if there's more information about that story. But just strange. Probably one of the strangest escaped or dumped exotic animals that I've seen in recent times. And what else do we got? We've got some, well, Bigfoot. Why not? Let's talk about Bigfoot. We haven't had too much to talk about Bigfoot. We did have one decent story last year, which is mentioned in this particular story about a countdowns. Look back, not necessarily all of last year, but it looks like it goes back quite a few years. And obviously, this time of the year, December, late December, early January, we have a tendency to ramp up the year. We look back, we watch those 3-minute long Google commercials. We read all these stories on random websites about top stories, maybe the most viral videos on TikTok or whatever it is. And we do the same thing here in the paranormal. There's a lot of paranormal stories that wrap up the year or count things down. Lots of ranking of things. It's just what we do. And it's a good way to review the year. It's why I do my top 10 every single year. Well, since 2010. So the U.S. Sun, so the Sun, which is based in United Kingdom, I didn't know there was a U.S. version. Of course, they got to make money somehow, I guess, right? They published a list of the 5 best Bigfoot sightings of the last 10 years that it says prove the legendary beast exists. I'm a little hesitant to use the word prove in a video or a photograph. I think is very difficult to prove anything. You need a little bit more than that. But the most recent event on the list took place last year, and it was filmed on the Cass River in Michigan in July of 2021. The video spurred a lot of debate, and there was a lot of interpretation as to what you were looking at. A lot of people saw a baby Bigfoot in the arms of this creature going across the river, completely hair covered as brown. Again, for those in chat, I do have a picture. I'll show you the Cass River incident. If you've not seen that, I'm sure you have. Again, a viral video. You can click on that picture and it will come out of the chat so you can see a little bit bigger. But just a brown covered bipedal something or other. Could be a person, could be Bigfoot. Who knows? Doubt it's a bear. We can eliminate a bear from that. But what was it? And again, the people will see something in its arms. Could be a baby Bigfoot or maybe even a deer. Some people say they see in its arms as it crossed the river out in the open. Apparently, there's a couple of people out there kayaking, and they just so happened to see this thing crossing the river. A lot of people also think it could just be a fisherman in waders or just a hoax video. I mean, a fisherman in waders, maybe, but where's the gear? And why would it be carrying a deer? And why would it be hunting in July if it is a deer? It would be illegal. So a lot of questions, and unfortunately, no answers. The second one comes from February of 2020, from a location that I've been to a number of times, camped out there. And speaking of kayaking, I've kayaked a majority of that ginormous reservoir that surrounds. Well, I guess it doesn't surround. It's in the middle of it. And that's the Salt Fork State Park in Ohio. And they even got a primitive campground that's called Bigfoot Ridge. There's a lot of activity down at Salt Fork. It's part of what's called the Sasquatch Triangle here in Ohio. It's pretty much one of the corners, I guess you could call, of the Sasquatch Triangle. It's a pretty popular area for Bigfoot sightings. Tons of deer down there. They're just wandering around during the daytime. It's a little scary to drive through, to be honest. Gosh, I've probably seen about 15 or 20 just kayaking, just hanging out down by the river or I guess the reservoir, drinking. It's a short video of a purported Bigfoot moving through a wooded area. Again, it also created a lot of controversy since it looks convincing, but again, has nothing to back it up. It's just a random story. And a lot of people feel it's just a person in a costume. Of course. It's like blackish grayish was explained by the witness. But again, nothing to back up that story. So again, I'll put a little picture there in the chat room. Not quite a mature forest, but that could be Salt Fork. I've done my fair share of hiking through there over the years. Not really a whole lot of mature forest there, but could be. The third of 5 of these stories took place in Oregon, and we go back to 2019. And it was collected by Dr. Maria Mayer. Probably know that name. A primatologist, a member of the television show Expedition Bigfoot. Move over, Matt Moneymaker. The video was captured using a thermal imaging camera of what is described as big and ape-like. I don't know. It just looked like a little dot to me, but you can see it moving around if you watch the video. It was on it was Travel Channel, I think it was. I forget what channel they're on, but yeah, you could see it's just a little red blob. They made a big deal about this, though. I remember it was probably one of the bigger sightings of the year. Looked like bipedal, but it's really hard to tell when you're looking through thermal imaging cameras. Yeah, Travel Channel. But a lot of people saw this right away and said, no, that's just a bear who is standing up. They can't really see. It's dark, but they could sniff. And if you guys were downwind, it's probably trying to figure out who's making all that ruckus and noise. And the lights, I'm sure, from the production cameras and crew and the sound mics and all that stuff, I'm probably wondering what the heck is going on down the road. The fourth piece of evidence was purportedly collected by a game warden in Northern California. Purportedly. So a lot of skepticism behind this particular story, even those involved in the Bigfootery aspect of cryptozoology. The camera was set up to search for drug gangs back in 2016 and was in a remote area of the Sequoia National Forest. 27 miles in, they claim that you can't reach it by even ATVs. You have to walk through it. I don't know about that. It was claimed the camera was ripped off of the tree and buried in leaves. And footprints were also purportedly collected, but we never saw this evidence at all. It was a pretty close-up picture. Again, stirred up a lot of debate as to what we were looking at. Because of the strange close-up view of these hairy feet. What could that be? Bear? Could be a bear. You don't get enough detail to really figure it out, but it was a big deal. The fifth piece described happened back in October of 2012 in Provo Canyon, Utah. I didn't think this was that big of a deal. Siblings were out camping when they filmed a creature that stood up and walked away. They initially thought it was a bear, but it kind of freaked them out when it walked away. These were purportedly not Bigfoot believers. However, the 49-second video, which gained over 7.6 million views, was on a YouTube channel that only had Bigfoot videos. So I found that hard to believe that they were not believers. And the whole story, to me, didn't make any sense because they had nothing but Bigfoot videos on their YouTube channel. Image of that clip, throw that in the chat room. So if you're not in chat, you're not listening live, I apologize. Sorry about that, but you're not going to be able to see these. I guess I could do a blog post. Yeah, right. Me and blog posts. Maybe. We'll see. I just kind of thought of that now. But if you're in chat, you can see these pictures of the videos. Just a black splot there, blob squatch, pretty much. The video is a little bit more interesting, but still ambiguous. You really can't make out a whole lot of detail from it at all. But still interesting. And what kind of irritates me about this list, it's a good list. There's a couple of really interesting claims here. Anytime you have a primatologist or a professional involved in some of these things, granted it was for a TV show, and sometimes they kind of bend reality for these shows. I mean, come on, it's not all really real stuff. But what's kind of sad to me about this list, they don't mention. It's all about videos, I guess. It's all about stuff that's entertaining, I guess, more than. But it does say proof, so provide proof. And I don't think any of these videos really provide any proof. It's kind of evidence, but it's just data. It's just information collected, and most of these weren't in the search of this creature, except for the Oregon thermal image. But again, they didn't get close enough. They gathered no other evidence of anything. There's no DNA. There's no hair. There's no footprints. There's no scat. There's nothing. There's no other sightings anywhere near that area during that time frame. No vocalizations, even though I don't really trust that either. I've been in the woods and I've heard Bigfoot. What I thought was Bigfoot, then a little bit of hiking later, and I had found people in the woods that were probably doing that noise. So can't trust that. I can't trust random things smacking into trees. I don't know who came up with that, but that's silly, I think. But there's no other data to back these events up. But you don't have to go too far to see some interesting stories of such findings. The eDNA collection efforts of Dr. Jeff Meldrum back in 2017 in Washington State. He collected around potential nesting sites. The same with the aforementioned Expedition Bigfoot team. They collected, was it Kentucky, the Appalachian Highlands last year. They collected information of eDNA. That was a big story that I don't even know what happened with that. It just kind of, they made the big announcement. They had the show, and I never heard anything. Never heard anything since then. So I don't know. It must not have been anything completely major. I was purportedly unknown primate, but eDNA is very tricky because it's just that environmental DNA could come from pretty much anywhere. You might have gone to the zoo and gotten hair on you and might have not worn those pants in a couple of days, and then you go hiking in the woods and that eDNA gets left behind, and people think, well, there's a monkey by a tree. Could be as simple as that, but who knows? But yeah, no mention of anything more sophisticated than a photograph in those stories. So yeah, weird. But yeah, a lot of these are just viral videos. You really have to be careful, especially when things are on YouTube. So I have ad blocker on mine, so I don't always know. Sometimes you have to kind of pay attention to see if it's ad enabled. But more often than not, any of these fake UFO videos, these fake Bigfoot videos, fake ghost videos, they're all monetized. And all these people do is they get these videos, they upload them, they monetize them, and then they email out to news organizations who pick them up, make a story out of them, which is then copied and pasted all over the internet by news organizations. Then they hit shows like this, websites like The Anomalist and Unexplained Mysteries and others who also carry these. And then, of course, there's the debate behind them. Is it real? Is it real? Is it fake? Is it fake? Is it a bear? What is that? Even though it's probably fake. Just getting that debate drives up that number of views and puts a little shiny pennies in somebody's pocket. and everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame, along with a small check to make them feel like they got something worthwhile out of it. But sad but true. Anyway, let's leave that behind and let's move up to UFO news and some very sad news for UFO fans as former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid passed away last week. And Reid had been the big voice for a longtime proponent of UFO belief and was a major voice for the field in the government. Granted, most of it was since his retirement. But it's just still a very vocal person that the UFO field really sorely needed inside of the government, or at least with governmental ties. In 2007, he secured funding for a program to investigate UFOs and related phenomena through the Pentagon. And since then, has been a major proponent of UFO and UAP research and disclosure. And of course, could have led to where we're at today. Probably might not have been where we're at without Harry Reid. But Reid was 82 and had been dealing with cancer, so shouldn't be a major surprise. And I read that some people were shocked that this was an inside job or something. I don't think so. These are different times we're living in, and I don't know if you can just assume that anybody of a higher age is just passing away from government espionage because of you. I mean, the cat's out of the bag at this point. It's been out of the bag since 2017, so which is weird. That's in the next story, and our next story of tonight is a look back. 2021, the top 10 UAP / UFO stories of 2021. And Reid makes this piece, Harry Reid. He's in another news story, back to back. Medium.com is the website, Medium, released an article on December 29th titled, Top 10 UAP UFO Stories from 2021. The article is written by Bryce Zabel. A very heavily opinionated piece. I had a couple moments of I had to get up and walk away because I really didn't agree with some of this, and I'll talk a little bit about this as we go through it. Really heavily opinion piece. Of course, it's his view of the top 10 stories of last year, and it's pretty good that we have 10 UAP UFO stories from any given year. So it's time to celebrate that kind of stuff. And speaking of 2017, when the floodgates opened, yes, that was the New York Times article that really opened the door for UAPs and UFOs to be acknowledged by the government and the general public. It was no longer, wackos and weirdos seeing these in trailer parks and, the laughing last-minute story, if they had time for it, at the bottom of the news hour, after the weather, after sports, after the zany story of the week, and then you hear the X-Files theme, and they, snickering and laughing, and everybody rolling their eyes as they talk about this strange UFO story locally, and it's just a big joke. Well, it's no longer a joke. This is on the front page of newspapers and magazines, and this has become a full-fledged big deal, acknowledged by the government. And it's weird. It's still weird to hear that. Still weird to talk about that after all these years of it just hiding in the background. And you had a couple of crazy, zany people pounding their hands on a desk at a conference talking about how real this stuff is, and nobody wants to hear. And, you go back to the Phoenix Lights incident where they made fun of that. The governor walking in with a somebody dressed up as an alien, handcuffed, and everything was a joke. And ever since 2017, it seems like it's a big deal. So Bryce Zabel states that 2021 was the biggest year for UFOs since. But why? So he counts it down with the top 10, with number 10 saying the final disappointing sputtering out of the To the Stars Academy. And I was confused by that. I knew what happened last year, of course. The author seems to insinuate that the TTSA is now defunct, that it's gone, which is not true. It's still around. They're not doing a tremendous amount of work. I think a lot of what they're doing is just not really public knowledge or public information. It's kind of happening behind closed doors. They've got a lot of contracts that they're working through with the government. Still a lot of research going on. And of course, last year, it's pretty much been just short of a year of last year where it said goodbye to Chief Operating Officer Steve Justice, Director of Special Programs Luis Elizondo, and Advisor Chris Mellon, who were announced in a press conference, or I should say a press release, that they have moved on to other projects. And that seemed to be kind of a warning sign, a red flag that this organization may not last too long. But then the organization went public a couple of months later, and public trading. So it's a real deal. But Tom DeLonge does seem to be focused more on making music and movies. I think he just announced the release of a new movie, I believe. And like I said, the To the Stars Academy seems focused more on entertainment and education. But the company's still active. They're still doing things. They still have contracts out that they're working through or working with. But yeah, it seems like, I don't know, DeLonge is just kind of, well, he's always been out there. Not UFO out there, just out there as a person. He's like a squirrel. He's always focused on something, and then until something else gets his attention. But they're still active. I don't think that they're done. They just really haven't made anything big lately. But so I'm going to go out there on a limb, make a prediction. 2022, you're going to hear from something from the To the Stars Academy, TTSA. They'll say something this year. They'll have some video or some purported evidence or something. This year, they'll be back. Number 9 of the top 10 UFO stories, according to Medium.com. Former presidents and presidential candidates go on the record. So last year, both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama talked about UAPs in interviews. The author kind of makes it sound like they admitted that there's something behind it, but I believe Barack's was just kind of laughing about it when he said it. So I don't know how serious that conversation really was. We also have presidential candidates: Senator Mitt Romney, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. They're all vocally trying to get to the bottom of the issue of UAPs and UFOs. So that's true. In addition to Harry Reid, you got a lot of other people that are talking about UFOs. I think you can go back. I think, gosh, at least all the way that I can think of, back to Jimmy Carter, who had his own UFO sighting. I think he was in politics at the time on a plane, and he saw a UFO. I don't know about Reagan. Did Reagan talk about UFOs? I don't remember. I don't think he would have either. But President Trump wasn't a big believer in it. Kind of was very negative about UFOs. But I think every president has mentioned it or been asked in some certain way. So it's nothing new, I don't think. But it's interesting to see presidential candidates talking about that, because that could be construed as something, putting them in a loony bin. But again, this is mainstream stuff for the last couple of years. So it's not out of the ordinary for anybody to mention that, because it is a a focus of debate and concern. So, of course, if I'm a presidential candidate, knowing that's an issue that's out there, of course, I'm going to make mention, I'm going to address it, or at least say, oh, I want to get to the bottom of it, even if I don't care. It's just something to get votes or attention. Number 8, investigative reporters take on a cosmic Watergate. Well, that's interesting, right? This focused on the work of Australian Ross Coulthart and American George Knapp, we know that guy, who have dug deep into the UFO UAP issue through journalism, writing books and articles, which can get you in trouble sometimes. It goes beyond just those random UFO books. I wrote one of those myself that pop up every now and again on Amazon or what else. This was actual investigative reporting, digging deep into these issues, what's going on behind closed doors, what are people talking about. And that gets you in a lot of trouble. But these two have pushed that envelope, which is pretty good. We need more of that. That keeps people honest, keeps information from getting stalled out sometimes, and it keeps the doors open for conversation. You got to have that. Whatever happened to journalism? Real journalism, not the stuff you see on the news. That's all fake. It is fake news, really, when you come down to it. It's all for ratings, so they'll spin a story however they feel it's going to get. It's going to sell more commercial space. That's really all they care about, is how many cars you can sell in an hour or half hour. It's really, nobody cares about the news. They only care about what people want to hear. Sad but true. Number 7, skeptics had a hard year. Now, the author was insinuating that with more people coming forward, that dismissal about the UFO UAP phenomena is difficult. It's no longer an option, is what he says. Yeah, I mean, there's been a few stories where it seems that way, but skeptics have not given up, not dismissed everything. We see quite a few stories that a lot of people come straight forward and are able to potentially explain some of these things that the people who have recorded them swear up and down are UFOs, but people will come straight forward and say, look, here's the information, here's the evidence, here's probably what happened. But again, if you're a true believer in UFOs, UAPs, you're going to see things a little bit different. You're going to see things that way. Number 6, U.S. intelligence leaders tease non-human explanations. Okay. Trump's director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, Obama's director of central intelligence, John Brennan, and the current director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, see as well as I see Luis Elizondo. All of these people have stated that something beyond Earth is going on behind these UAP sightings. So, non-human explanations. I don't know if that's completely true. That's what the author says, but I think some of these statements were just made to get attention. I don't think that we're leaning toward aliens or Martians or whatever you insert strange creature here. I think the real threat here is A, we don't know what it is, and B, I think the bigger threat here is if it's another nation, another superpower that's spying on us or putting equipment in the skies that we can't figure out what it is. I mean, who knows? But I think that's a bigger threat. I know that doesn't make sense, but the bigger threat being another country versus alien technology. Obviously, if it's alien technology, they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be figured out. So if that's the case, it's probably not a threat. If they roll up in giant ships and block out the sun and start blowing up buildings with lasers through the bottom of their ships, that's a threat. It also sounds like Independence Day, but That's kind of the spectrum that we see. But I don't know if these are alien powered craft. I've said it a number of times on the show. My belief is it would just be scout ships. Same thing that we do. We send out probes. I don't think it's any sort of threat. And for any alien species to send a ship that far through space, that would take an immense amount of energy and time. So I'm not sure about that. So I think we'd have to lean toward Russian or Chinese technology that is threatening our skies. And I've also said there could be domestic stuff as well that people have designed that we just don't know about. But is it aliens? Could be aliens. It always could be aliens. Number 5 on the list, new obits for Harry Reid are a wake-up call. A little confused on that one until I read it. So basically, the author said that numerous obituaries, the history of Harry Reid was, after his passing, were on pretty much every news website. And he felt that there was no mention of UFOs, UAPs on purpose, that this information was buried and that people didn't want to talk about it, and just to shift the focus. But if you spent any time and you read any of these pieces that were honoring the memory of Harry Reid, there were very good, lots of information about his history and the things that he has accomplished and did during his height of tenure in the government. Not so much what happened after his retirement. I mean, yeah, we got to remember that, people in the UFO field celebrate him as a hero because of what he's been doing lately, but you tend to forget that he's had a very long history in politics, and he's accomplished a lot during that time. But so I kind of took that as a personal challenge, saying that nobody, I think he said that one or maybe two outlets mentioned something about Harry Reid, but everything else was just cover-ups, basically. But I did a quick search, and I got articles from TMZ, Daily Mail, The Hill, a number of other sources that talked about his UFO interest since his passing. So I think that was just highly subjective, and you were looking for, and you found what you were looking for with that. Number 4 on the list, NASA's Bill Nelson says the quiet part out loud. Now, NASA has been, it's been a concern of mine as well. NASA has just ignored UFO topic completely. They've always been focused in outer space, focusing on planets and moons in our solar system or other galaxies, for that matter, looking for life out there. And they don't really care about what's happening in our backyard. So they've kind of ignored the topic. But Bill Nelson's finally opened NASA up on the topic, talking about what could potentially be happening in our atmosphere and around us. Again, this kind of goes with the I mean, it's become fashion lately since, again, 2017 to talk about UAPs and UFOs in politics. So, again, I think that all comes down to money. You see a lot of money being tossed around at the government on UAP and UFO research. I mean, why would you not want to do that if you're NASA? They get a lot of money. All their funding comes from the government. So you can't ignore something that's going to possibly bring you money. I hate to say it that way, but that's what I feel about it. Of course they're going to talk about UFOs and UAPs. If it's going to get a couple zeros on their check, why not do it? But you can't ignore it anymore. Well, it's just not now. We'll see if it goes away, if it fades off, if new information presents itself about foreign or domestic adversaries that have invented drone technology beyond what we know, then yeah, it'll probably fade away, and NASA will have to come up with something else. Number 3 on the list, 60 Minutes. This was a big deal. I agree with this story, or this part of the story. 60 Minutes breaks its UFO taboo. The UAP episode broke new ground. Just being on the show. I mean, a half a century long. It's been very conservative. Not something I would have ever watched as a TV show. I can't stand that little clicking of the time thing. Anyway, it just drives me crazy. But yeah, it's they kind of make up with their own idea of what news is. I agree with that. But that UAP episode, which is it's been on twice, it's really helped bring UFOs and UAPs into the mainstream. I totally agree with that. That 60 minutes episode was mind-boggling because that show never really gets into that kind of stuff. But again, does it come down to because it was popular? 60 Minutes just finally break and say, well, maybe we should talk about that because we can sell some cars. Who knows? But that to me was a big deal because it's not the kind of show that you would ever think you would see or hear about UFOs or UAPs on. Number 2 on the list, the preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena says UAP is a real problem. This basically comes down to is number 1 on my list of the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2021, which was the June 25th, 2021 report that was released on UAPs, that whopping 9-page report that we'd all waited months for, anticipating it, to kind of be let down by it, I think. The author of this article has taken an interpretation that the report leans in the direction that these reports are made about objects that are not made on Earth. I don't know how you could say that if you've read it. I don't think it's entirely true. Yes, they can explain it, but it seems to me that if you read it for what it's worth, if you're objective about it, it doesn't really lean completely in the direction of UFOs from outer space or from alien technology. It leaves the door open for that, but I think the direction is more in line with technology we just don't understand. And that doesn't mean that that's alien technology, just technology we don't get, we don't know. So, yeah, the door's open either way, but I don't think it leans completely in that direction. The number 1 story, according to the author here on Medium.com, was the passage and signing of the Gillibrand Rubio Amendment to the National Defense Appropriations Act. Of course, that just really is still unfolding as we speak. The defense bill so far includes an act to create a new office to investigate and report on the UAP topic instead of burying the reports. Kind of sounds like something that would happen at the basement of the Pentagon, I think. But we've seen a little bit of, call it an adversary to that, trying to pass other things to create offices to try to bury the stuff. But last time we read, Biden finally signed it, but it's now up to Congress to finalize this bill without taking anything out of it. But I think it's going to pass as is. So that'll be exciting and could be a big story for 2022. But we'll see how big of an office this is or what it's really going to report, if it does report anything to the general public or we hear anything from this new office. But still exciting. I don't agree entirely with some of the content of that list, but it's still a good list, and it's exciting to see that UFOs and UAPs is no longer in the dark ages. So exciting to see that. And probably talking about space, one last story tonight. The James Webb Space Telescope. I just kind of, I want to talk about it, but I'm kind of afraid to because of all the problems this poor thing is encountered since, gosh, well before I started my show 13 plus years ago. It's just had so many problems, so many issues. To finally get this point, it's finally in space. And today, it was today? Was it yesterday? Yeah, today, they finally unfurled the entire sun shield. So they started it, they took a break, and they finished it The sun shield is they say it's about the size of a tennis court. Can't remember the exact dimensions, but this thing is thin. It's as thin as human hair. So it's, unfurling is scary because it has to be intact. If it's shredded in any way, forget it. Might as well just launch that thing into the sun, or well, I guess it's headed away from the sun, but you know what I mean. It's not even worth anything. So it was an 8-day process to unfold and tighten the protective shield. It started December 28th, and it's done. It was done this morning, 11:59 a.m. Eastern Time. Whew. That's all I have to say about that. And it's almost there. It's going to take a little bit more time for this thing to get in place. And tell you, when they start taking pictures, you are going to be impressed. I can just say that. Hopefully, before the year is out, we get some not just photographs, but we get some information from this thing. Get our money's worth out of it. As Planet Earth, everybody pitched in. I think every country pitched in a few dollars or 20 for this thing. Very expensive, $10 billion over budget. But hey, who's counting? Just money, right? You can't take it with you. Yes, thank you, Canada, for your major contribution. But I think we're going to get some interesting data from this. Maybe not this year, but I hope we're going to get some interesting stories. They'll probably, leak teasers about it, about James Webb finding the source of the Big Bang or some other information from it. It'll probably be some teaser story, but regardless, I look forward to that. Look forward to all the news that we're going to hear this year, 2022. It could be an interesting, hopefully, it's going to break the mold from the last couple of years. It's gotten a little boring, not going to lie. Loch Ness Monster, come on. We need some great stuff out there, but I think we're going to see some interesting stuff this year. Can't wait, and can't wait for episode 500. Be the next show. Unfortunately, it won't happen next week. No show next week. Take a little bit of my winter break, but I'll be back. Keep working on the events listing. I'll have that even more updated in 2 weeks. But for now, keep your eyes in the skies, your ears in the woods, the hair standing on the back of your neck. Always keep your mind slightly ajar. Above all else, you know it. Don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting.